My name is Charlie Banks, and I'm a 17-year-old kid who started the Young Minds Podcast to spread the Word of God. It is my goal to do this podcast. You learn, you laugh, you cry, whatever it may be. I just hope that you enjoy it and maybe grow in your relationship with Christ. But just remember, this thing that the Lord is starting is way bigger than any of us. So let's get after it.
Welcome to the podcast. It's an honor to have you on, and I can't wait to get into what you have. So if you could introduce yourself, and then we'll just keep going.
Okay. My name is Tina Evans, and my husband and I started at Northside about, I guess it's been a little over 2 years ago. Not long before COVID hit, we were kind of feeling like God was calling us somewhere else. And we were going to a different church, and I actually worked in the office for a couple of years. And I had a lot of friends and, just people that I was close to, but we were just not feeling, God's calling there. Mm-hmm. Well, then COVID hit, and we did TV church at home for, a while. Yeah. And we actually live in Florida, so we were trying to find a church in that area. Well, where we live, there's not much to choose from.
Right.
And we come from a big church. We're from Ohio, mm-hmm. and our church ran anywhere from 1,500 or more. So these little tiny...
It felt a little strange, right?
Yes, yeah. It was very awkward. So we started looking once again, and the very first Sunday we walked into Northside, there was no question. And the choir had a lot to do with that as well. We came from a big choir. Mark and I both sang in the choir, sang in quartets and duets and, praise teams and all that. So we loved every bit of it. Mm. But we love everything about the church, and we knew that almost from the beginning.
Okay, so were you here before? Well, no, I don't remember when the renovation started.
When what started?
When the renovation started. I don't think you were.
Oh, no, we were not.
It was already done like this. I just have to ask that for some people, because I'm like, were you here before or not?
No, this is all we've known. So.
Yeah, me too. It's weird because, probably years ago, when I was like 2, I was here at a trunk or treat or something, found the pictures, and I'm in a weird costume or something. And I found those, oh my gosh, the Family Life Center's not changed since I was 2.
Yeah.
The letters are still the same. The tables are still the same.
Wow.
And I'm like, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, I guess. But, I see y'all all the time up there in the choir, especially your husband, because he wears those bright shirts.
Oh, he loves his bright shirts.
Especially when he wears that pink one. I'm like, there he is, up there.
There he is. Which is funny because he's kind of he's not shy, but he's just
more of a quiet person. Yeah.
But he loves those bright shirts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he does.
Yeah. So if you want to just jump into your testimony, however much of it you want to tell. I know you've got a, I would say a lengthy one, but you got a lot to tell.
I do. I made an outline, but I'm going to try my best not to read, my outline, but just to kind of keep myself in line with time-wise,
mm-hmm.
So I wanted to start out by saying that God is a personal God. He cares about the tiny details of our lives, even when it seems like he's not paying attention, or, even we feel like sometimes that he's even forsaken us. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. And I'm hoping that my testimony will be one that shows that, I brought some verses out that I wanted to share. Psalms 139, 1 through 6, and 16 through 17. And this is the New Living Translation, by the way. O Lord, you have examined my heart, and you know everything about me. You know when I sit down or when I stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I am going to say even before I say it. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God, and they cannot be numbered. And then the last one I wanted to share at the beginning here was Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart.
And after watching that video, because just for some background, Miss Tina, she gave me a video of her testimony to kind of like, I guess, prepare me, not just for the questions, but, for what I'd be hearing. So my, eyes didn't, just to kind of throw a funny part in it. Like, so they didn't get as big as saucers,
Yes.
hearing some of it.
Yes.
And like that last verse really fits. That really, really fits. And I'll say this too. You were probably, there may be, and I'm sorry if I forget, but I think you're the first person that's like asked me, to be on rather than it be the other way around. Because most people are like, yeah, sure, I'll be on it, because I mentioned it to them.
Sure.
But you're the first person that is asked.
Sure.
And like that's so cool. It's like, and I'm so happy that you're telling your testimony on my podcast.
Well, I feel like, and this actually it runs right into my outline here. My reason for being so detailed with my testimony, and I am going to be a little detailed, and it may be a trigger warning for some people. So I just kind of want to give a warning about that. But the reason for being so detailed is not to glorify the people or the events or even myself. I want others that may have experienced similar things in their lives or maybe experienced the same things in their future. I want them to know the amazing redemptive power of God, that it has been so incredibly evident in my 61 years of life. And that is my purpose for telling my testimony. I want something good to come out of all the bad, the beauty from ashes, so to speak. And so that's where I'm going with this. So starting out with my testimony, and again, this is a little rough, but the early years in my home, I lived with my mom and my dad, and we had, my last name was Tye, so there was Tina Tye, Tony Tye, Tommy Tye, and Terry Tye. And my father grew up in a family of 10 children, and he was the baby. He grew up in the hills of Tennessee and Kentucky, the Appalachian Mountain area. His dad was a coal miner, and they were farmers, and just if you can picture the lifestyle that he had there. And I don't know what was going on with my dad. Later on, I realized that there was mental illness involved, but I didn't know that growing up.
Yeah, as a little kid, you wouldn't know that.
You don't know. I just saw his behavior, and that was. My dad was very, very abusive. Never to me. He never touched me. He never hit me. But he would beat my mom, and he would beat my brothers. Very physical, and then also very verbal. There were times where we would have dinner, and my mom would say, you guys go out of the house. Get out of the house. And so she would make us leave the house at dinner time and not come back in until she called us. And I would always come back in, and I would always smell alcohol, like rubbing alcohol. And I just always associated that with her pain, because I would see the bruise marks and the scratches and all the things that he would do. And then there'd be times we'd be watching TV, and he'd get mad, and he'd get up and throw a chair and just smash the television. And so there was a lot of violence. I remember my mom and dad would fight, and I was an extremely light sleeper, and so there were a lot of times where I would hear them fighting, and I would be so upset, and I'd come to the end of the hallway, and I would sit at the end of the hallway and just watch them. My dad, they were so wrapped up in what was going on, they weren't even paying attention. But I learned very early on, I had that spirit of fear, that spirit of fear from a very, very young age. So when I was 5, my little brother I was the oldest. So there was me, then Tony, then Tommy, then Terry. Tony was a year younger, and he was 4. He ended up getting a virus. We both got a virus. He got a virus that his was a little worse than mine. But in the middle of the night, he choked, and he got sick and choked to death. And we didn't find him till the morning. And because of all the stuff that was going on with my mom and dad, Tony dying at 4 sent my mom into a huge
spiral.
Man, it was really bad. And I think that was kind of the beginning of the end. She tried to commit suicide, and she took all these pills and then laid on the couch. And I had to grow up really fast. I was very, very mature for.
Right. And I was thinking, I was like, man, she must have had to.
Yes,
really...
because I was the oldest, and my mom would even confide in me about things,
really?
And so after Tony died, she's going through this, and so she had taken all those pills, And then she starts yelling for me to call my grandma. And she said it's like she realized what she had done and she didn't want to do it anymore. But she had already taken the pills. So she asked me to call Nana. Nana was my grandma.
Yeah.
So I called Nana and they called the ambulance and all of that. But then there was just one thing after the other of the abuse that was going on. And one of the things that my dad, and I found this out later, this is not something that my mom told me as a young girl, but I guess my mom had, she would fight back a lot of times, but then it got to the point where she wouldn't even fight back. She was afraid. She was too afraid of him. But he had told her that if you ever leave me, I will either, mess up your face so that no man will ever look at you again. And she was very, very pretty, or I'll kill you, And so she was scared to death to leave him. So I'm in 3rd grade, and it was only halfway through school, the school day, and my grandma and my mom picked me up at school, and I'm like, why are you guys picking me up? Well, my mom had left my dad, and so she had thrown all of our clothes in the back of the car, and we were going to go over to Nana's house to live. And so we had lived with my grandmother, so it was Nana, and my grandpa's name was Beanie. I don't know why they called him Beanie, but it was Nana and Beanie, so you have reference of who I'm talking about. And Nana was a very young grandmother. Nana would have...
Yeah, I thought when I saw the video, I was like, man, that's... that's not something you hear often at all.
She was a very young grandmother. I mean, and she was very wild. She was not a Christian. She wore, back in the 70s, the hot pants, the patent leather boots, the mini skirts, And when I ended up going to church, those are the things that I wore to church because I didn't know any better,
right,
So anyway, we'll come to that later. But anyway, so we had been living with Nana for a while, and my mom and I shared a bed, actually. And then my baby brother was only a year old. And so I was 9, my brother Tom was 7, and then my baby brother was a year old. And my dad had called, and he told my mom had the car, one of the cars, and she had his fishing poles in the trunk. And so he called her and he said, I want to come over to your mom's house and get my fishing poles. And she said, all right, that's fine. So I had already gone to bed, and they had my bedroom door shut. And I'm hearing this secondhand from Nana later. Right. But evidently my dad had come to the door, and my mom went and opened the front door and then walked into the kitchen to get the car keys so that she could open up the trunk. Well, after she had opened up the door, my grandmother was sitting right on the couch right there by the front door. And she looked down and she saw that my dad had his shotgun in his hand. And my dad was a hunter. He had like 5 shotguns. And Nana said that she knew instinctively what my dad was planning. So Nana, again, was telling me all this, that my dad stepped in the door, and at that time my mom was walking towards him with the car keys. And so he lifted up the shotgun, and he cocked it, and accidentally shot a round off into the ceiling. And so then at that time, Nana and Beanie both went running through the house. He shot through the ceiling, and then she watched him. He took the shotgun and point blank shot my mom right through the heart. And then she went down. So that's when Nana and Beanie went running through the house, and Beanie went into his bedroom, but Nana came into my bedroom. And so she ran in the bedroom, and obviously by then I'm wide awake because I heard the shots. Yeah. And she's not making any sense. We had a poodle named Gidget. And she's like, Gidget shot your mom, and not saying anything at all about my dad. She's just talking about our dog. And then she climbs in my closet and shuts the door. And so I'm sitting there like, what in the world?
Right.
So anyway, after, I don't know, it seemed like forever, I heard another shot, and then it was silent. And I sat there, and so again, I'm finding out secondhand through Nana that my grandfather had gone out and was just running around the backyard just trying to decide what to do. Should he leave? Should he go back in the house because his grandchildren are in the house, his wife is in the house. So after everything got silent, he saw the car that my dad had drove up in. He saw his buddies that came with him jump off our porch and get in the car and drive away. So at that point, he thought it might be safe to come back in the house. So evidently, he came back in the house and walked through the kitchen and then walked into the living room. And evidently, after my father had taken my mom's life, we're guessing anyway, that he came to his senses, realized what he had done. And so he had taken the shotgun and sat it on the floor and propped it so that it shot right through his under his chin and shot, this half of his face right off. And then he fell into my brother's playpen. So again, I'm hearing all of this, and I don't even know what all took place other than I stayed in the bedroom. The next thing I know, that the police are there, and my bedroom had 2 doors on it, and one went to the living room where they were. The other one went to the kitchen and family room area. So the police came, and they took us out through the other door, and we had a babysitter that was not an elderly, but an older babysitter, and she watched us all the time. So she was like family,
right.
And we were very comfortable with her. And so we went to her house, and so I just remember it just seemed like forever, like days. Looking back, it probably wasn't more than 2 days, but it seemed like forever staying there. And I'm like, why can't I go home? Why can't I see my mom? And they just kept saying, your mom is sick. Your mom is sick. And so finally, my Uncle Ron, which is my mom's brother, he came over to the house. He sat me and my brother down, and he told me that, my mom was dead and that my dad was dead. And, then we were getting ready to go to the funeral. I went right from finding that out, and then we went to the funeral. And so my mom is in one funeral on one side of the city we grew up on, and then my dad's on another funeral home on the other side of the city. And so I just remember being at my mom's funeral, and I'll go into a more positive note about all of this. There was a pastor who preached my mom's funeral, and I didn't know him. I had never met him before, but my uncle, my mom's brother, knew of this pastor, and for some reason he kind of took me under his wing and invited me to come to church. And he was very caring and very gentle with me, in that circumstance. And he invited me to come to their church. So anyway, when I grew up, my mom and dad never went to church, even though my dad's brother was a Baptist preacher, which is amazing to me, but he was a Baptist preacher. But my dad's mom and dad would come and get us every Sunday morning, and they would take us to church. But it was the kind of church where, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I looked it up. I'm trying to find the name of it, but it's almost like a sing-song type of preaching where they sing, and when they sing, they're not sing, but it's sing-song. I don't know how else to say it, but they preach.
Like the pastor may say something and then the choirs are behind them?
No,
something like that?
No,
or?
It's a way of preaching where when they take a breath, I can't even describe it, but it's an old-time way of preaching, and I think that they do it in the, more in old-time, Tennessee, Kentucky, that kind of area. But I didn't get anything out of it. I didn't understand his preaching at all. And the only time I would wake up, we would sit in the front row, and I would lay my head on my grandma's lap, and I would only wake up when he would pound on the pulpit, or he would scream, and he would yell quite a bit, So, needless to say, I didn't get a lot out of those sermons. But anyway, my cousin, I found out, went to the church that, the pastor that preached my mom's funeral. She was going to that church. And I said, well, can I go with you? Because I got invited and I wanted to check it out. So I just remember her and I were sitting in the back row, and we're playing Truth or Dare. And she dared me to go forward during the invitation. And so it's amazing that God can use things that, you don't plan, because I had no idea why I was going forward. I had no idea what was even being said. So I did. I took her dare and I went forward. Well, once I got back in that room, in those days they would take you back in a little room, and a lady would talk with you, and she would show you the plan of salvation. And I just remember being very serious at that moment, like, okay, I better take this serious. And I didn't get saved right then, but it stuck with me. God's word stuck in there, and it made sense to me. And I started having this go through me where I needed something in my life that made sense. I needed something that gave me security, that made me feel like that there was some kind of hope, that there was some kind of security in my life. And so I ended up getting saved about a year later, at the church I went to. And at that time, I decided that I wanted to go to the Christian school. And again, for the security reason of it, I wanted stability in my life. My grandmother, Nana, again, was not a Christian. We had a built-in keg in our bedroom, or in our family room. We had a built-in keg, and we had, parties. We had a built-in pool, and so we were always having parties, and none of that was stability for me, And not long after my mom died, my grandpa, who was going to help raise us, he died at 41 years old, of hardening of the arteries, and so Nana kind of went into a spiral, and so then she ended up drinking and then becoming an alcoholic, and so it just kind of spiraled out of control. And so my choice was to go to the Christian school and to get involved in church and to get involved in the youth group, and so I had chosen to go to this Emmanuel Baptist school. And I remember my girlfriend and I, best friend at the time, we were sitting on my front porch. And we were so excited because we heard these new neighbors were moving in across the street. And we found out that they had a boy our age.
Yeah.
And so I was so excited. So I see this boy, and he's riding up and down our street, back and forth on his banana seat bike, which you're probably too young, probably don't even know what that is. But he's riding back and forth on his banana seat bike with his baseball hat on backwards. And I remember all his little freckles on his face. And he came up to me, and Robin, my friend, and he said, "I heard one of you guys are going to be going to my school." And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to be going there." He's like, "Well, my dad is going to be the principal." And they called him headmaster at the Christian school, but his dad was going to be the headmaster of our school. So it was almost like God was preparing me because, Nana was not, like I said, not a Christian, and there was no stability, no training, no discipline, there was plenty of discipline, but there was just nothing that made me feel safe. And so I would go with his family. I would ride with them to school every morning, ride home with them every night. I go to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, all the youth group things. I was constantly with his family, and his dad was the headmaster of the school. Well, Mark's mom ended up becoming like my mentor, and she is a Mother Teresa. I mean, that's her second name in our family because she's just an angel. She is a godsend to me, and it's so cute because I dressed like Nana, and I was interested in her son. She would have talks with me about how we, Christian young ladies should dress and maybe not wear such short shorts or and the mini skirts and all that kind of stuff, So anyway, let's see here. So after all of this, Mark and I dated on and off. And we finally ended up getting married in 1982. And I always tell Mark that I could never have divorced him because, I was so in love with his family. And his mom was like my mom, and so to me, about a year and a half after I lose my parents, God gives me another set of parents right across the street, and it was just such a beautiful picture of God's goodness and God's, what I talked about in the very beginning about God being a personal God. God knows what we're going through, and he knows what pain we're feeling and what we need in our lives. And he knew that I needed stability in my life, so they show up right across the street from me. I mean, I couldn't have asked for more. So since then, we've been married 41 years. We have 3 children, Amber, Ryan, and Amy. And we have 3 grandbabies. Marley, she's 11. She's actually sitting out there in the lobby. Olivia is 7. And then Samson, and he is 4. Mark and I, being married 41 years, it's one thing to grow up across the street from each other and to date. But it's another thing to be married to each other and to live with each other. And even though he knew what I had grown up with, I don't think that he truly understood.
Until you got married?
Yeah, because I brought a lot of baggage, and Mark grew up in this squeaky clean, ridiculous, Christian home that it couldn't have been farther from my life. He didn't understand.
I'm not saying you're opposites, but in the way your lifestyles were, opposites attract.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So we had our struggles, one of mine was fear. I was always worried that everybody was going to die and that everybody was going to leave me, and so that spirit of fear stuck with me for a long time, and that's something that God has definitely helped me overcome over the years. Both of my brothers reacted totally different than I did. My younger brother was not a Christian. My older brother, he's younger than me, but older.
Yeah.
I believe he's a Christian, and he was a Christian for a long time. But I think that he still tap into that power that we have. We have such power in the Holy Spirit, and I'm so thankful that God removed my anger almost from the beginning, and he turned it into like when I went to college. I went to Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, Jerry Falwell's church, school and church, and I studied psychology because I was no longer angry at my dad. I mean, I was sad, don't get me wrong. I was very sad, and I was very depressed, and had that fearful spirit, but I was more interested in why would he do that? What was going on in his head, what was going on in their lives. And so I studied psychology so that I could make sense of it. Whereas my brothers, the anger, stayed with them, and anger, oh man, it's just, it will eat you up. It'll eat you alive. And I saw other people in my life dealing with things that way, anger and, hating and resentment. And, I saw that wasn't working. That was not working for them. And so I'm just glad that God helped me, because it's only God. That's the only thing I can say, because I don't necessarily consider myself a strong person, but it's the people that he brought into my life. It's the circumstances that he allowed me to walk through and gave me the grace to accept them and to move on through him and through the power that he gave me in the Holy Spirit. So anyway, God had removed the anger, and he gave me a heart of compassion for my dad, helping me to forgive and to move on.
That's hard to do.
It's very hard. It's very hard. I wanted to read another verse, Ephesians 1, 4 through 7. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ, in accordance with his pleasure and his will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the one he loves, which is Jesus Christ. In him we have redemption through his blood. We have the forgiveness of sins in accordance with the riches of God's grace that he lavished on us. As an orphan, I was adopted into the family of God. I was given so much more than was taken from me. And so these verses mean so much to me because, as a kid, I don't know that I necessarily felt like an orphan, but I was an orphan, and I was an orphan at 9 years old, but like I said, less than 2 years later, I was adopted into the greatest family that I could possibly be a part of, so I wanted to share that. So I'd like to fast forward to current events. There's so much more that I could say, but we could be here for hours.
Well, one thing I did want to ask you about, because I just thought it was interesting, and also it was kind of a funny little bit, military.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah, and I didn't include that in here. When I, because Nana had turned into a very, very depressed person, alcoholism and very verbally abusive. My brothers were shipped off to foster homes, so I didn't even really get to grow up with my brothers. And I was the one that was home still, and I think that my brothers kind of resented me for a while because, they thought, well, why does she get to stay home? And why does she get to stay with Nana? But what they didn't see is the pain, because Nana, her daughter was shot right in front of her, and her grandson had just died. And then her husband dies at 41. And so Nana spiraled out of control, which made me feel like my life was out of control. So when I turned 18, I was gone. I decided I was going to do whatever I could. So I went to college for a year, and I did it on my own money. I got I got a certain amount of money from when my parents died. Yeah. And so when
that's expensive.
Yeah, it was at the time. It was very expensive. And when I ran out of money, I thought, what am I going to do? I can't go back home. I just can't go back home. So I thought that joining the Army, I'll get security and I'll get in shape. So anyway, it couldn't have been a more disastrous decision for me. I'm not saying that it's bad for everybody.
It depends on the person too.
Absolutely. And you're probably too young to know this, but I couldn't have been more Private Benjamin. I mean, it was absolutely the most ridiculous thing for me to be there. But God, in his goodness and his grace, he knew what I was going through. And so I had an issue with it because of the verbal abuse that you go through. I did make it through basic training, and I had started into my AI. I know, I was so excited that because I am not an athletic person. I am not physical. I mean, it was hilarious to watch me do these things, but I did graduate, so I was very proud of myself for that. But I was having a really rough time with the mental part of it. They're very abusive with their talk, and their whole idea is that they're gonna break you down so that they can build you back up again. And I couldn't handle the verbalness of it. There was a lot of other behaviors going on with the other women. To me, that I had an issue with, and we won't go into that, but I just was really struggling mentally, and it was not what I was expecting, because I was going there to escape, and that is not someplace you go to escape. It is not. So I went to my chaplain, because again, I was still going to church because I wanted stability, and I wanted to feel like that something makes sense. So I was going to church every week, and my chaplain spoke with me and basically told me what I needed to do. And so he told me I needed to go to talk to my captain. Well, again, God placing people in my life that are beneficial. I had a captain that didn't believe that women should even be in the service at that time. And so he told me, these are the things that you need to do. But I'm going to tell you, he said, they're going to dog you so bad. They're going to make you feel like you're deserting your country and all of these things. And so anyway, I got an honorable discharge. So I was very, very happy about that, and I was able to come home. And I would say that it was probably not more than 3 months later, Mark and I got married. So it was like boom, 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 boom.
Because y'all thought after, you left the military, y'all were probably never going to see each other again.
I did. He went to California, and I was, clear across, the United States. And I remember crying my eyes out because I thought, we're never going to see each other again. And so God had other plans, evidently. So anyway.
But if you want to go back and what you were
Yes. So fast forward to current events. I have worked pretty much since the age of 16. Always had my work be kind of my identity. And as I got older, it even became more of an identity because I loved what I did. I worked for a global consulting firm, and I worked in the recruiting department, and I did some travel, and I had a lot of responsibility. Absolutely loved my job. Loved my job, which not all of my jobs were that way, but God gave me this job. And I would say after 6.5 years or so of doing this job, all of a sudden my brain wasn't working properly, and I couldn't remember how to do things. The things that I had done, very simple things that I had done. And it wasn't all the time, it was just sporadically, but it was enough that my managers were noticing, and my work was suffering from it. And so it got to the point where I was actually put on, I can't even think of the word, just kind of a warning,
Was it something I believe, or?
No, they put me on notice, like if things don't, and they loved me, don't get me wrong, they loved me and I loved them, and like I said, I'd been there 6.5 years. So I would work overtime, which I wasn't supposed to do, but I would put it on my own dime. I would do it I wouldn't even clock my hours or anything, and I wouldn't, let anybody know I was trying to fix whatever I was doing, and I would stay hours and hours and hours, and I'd come home and I'd be in tears because I couldn't fix it. Whatever was going on with my brain, I couldn't fix. And so finally Mark got frustrated, and he's like, Tina, because my primary care physician kept saying, oh, honey, it's just menopause. You have menopause brain, because sometimes they say that. Yeah. And but it was more than that. It was more. And so and things like I would drive 45 minutes to work every day across the Sunshine Bridge, and it got to the point where I wouldn't remember how to use my Audible. I would listen to tapes, books on tape every time I would drive. I'd get in the car and I wouldn't remember how to turn on the Audible. I mean, it was silly things like that. Not remembering how to set a clock. I sat on the floor one time and we had this big piece of furniture clock. It was beautiful. And I wanted to set the clock, and I couldn't remember how to set 9:45.
And that can be frustrating when you can't do a simple task.
And knowing that you know how to do it, but yet your brain isn't functioning properly at that moment. But then an hour later, I would be fine again. So it was very baffling. And so finally, Mark's like, you have to go see a neurologist. You have to go see somebody. So fast forward again, I ended up being diagnosed with MS. And that was at the end of 2016. And then in the beginning of 2017, I was put on permanent disability. And so,
what's the technical term for that? Because I don't even know. I'm just wondering myself.
For multiple sclerosis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So MS. Yeah. And most, I shouldn't say most because every person is individual, but a lot of people are more physical. They have more physical issues. Now, as it's progressed, I've gotten more physical issues, but mine were showing more in my cognitive issues.
Because the way it first sounded was more like amnesia, or were you scared of something like that?
I was, because my grandmother ended up getting Alzheimer's, and so I'm thinking, gosh, at 55 at the time, I'm thinking, am I getting Alzheimer's? You know, I was scared to death. I didn't know what it was. So what's happening in the brain is that you have these blockages that kind of block the signals. You know, just to kind of put it in an easy way to put it, but that we have these pathways going throughout these highways, and they get blocked with this myelin, and it blocks the signal. So the brain is so amazing, though, because it will eventually try to find a new pathway so that it can give you that information. But what I was experiencing were all those blockages, and it would come and go.
It's like a traffic jam. It's like, can't go that way.
That's exactly right. So in 2017, I was put on permanent disability, and again, I'm like, I'm too young to be put out to pasture. I am too young to sit home and do nothing. And I had put all of my identity in that, and God started working on me at that time. He started working on my priorities, my prayer life, and my walk with Him. And I think, and now looking back in hindsight, I believe very much so that it was to prepare me for more tragedy that was coming, in the future. And he also, I started painting, and I didn't even know really that I could paint. So I have done I've done some pieces and had them at the Turner Center, and
cool. I've been up there.
Yeah, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So I'm very thankful for that. That the Lord has given me that. But in addition to the painting, He started working on my priorities. Like I said, I had always put my identity in the wrong things. My identity should be in Christ, and my security should be in Christ. And it didn't happen right away, because I went through depression. I went through, what am I going to do now? And Mark was going off to work every day, and I'm staying home, and I would sleep half the time. And I'm not here to say that it was all rosy, because it didn't happen right away. But looking back now, I'm seeing His hand. I'm seeing Him working on me throughout all that time. And so, fast forwarding to my children, my daughter Amber is the oldest, and then there's Ryan.
Was she the one that you sang with, if I remember
that
correctly?
Was Amy.
Okay.
That was Amy. She's the baby. She's the baby, the clown. Usually the babies are the clowns.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot that
I
you said to skip
say
that. I did watch that. Yeah.
Anyway, Amber and Ryan, the two oldest, had both gotten involved in drugs, and were not living a life that, we raised them in the church. They were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, many times on Wednesday nights. Mark and I sang in the choir. So they both knew, and they both had gone through the motions of, accepting Christ and getting baptized at a young age, but they both dealt with depression, and I don't know how much of that is genetics, because certainly my father had that. I had issues with that. I still, struggle over the years. I've struggled with that. So, who knows how much of that is genetic, but both of them chose to self-medicate and to just taking care of it through the wrong, motives. I mean, everything with drugs, alcohol, the way they were living and everything, you can only go so long before that stuff starts to destroy your life. So I forget what year it was, but Amber and Ryan, we sent them both out to Arizona. Amber had just had my granddaughter, my first granddaughter, and I was devastated because my granddaughter was just a year old, and we sent them to Arizona, and they were going to be out there for a whole year to go to Teen Challenge, which is a Christian-based program. It's not like AA or whatever, because they deal more with teaching about God as opposed to, the 12 steps and all of that kind of thing. It's more about God. So Amber, she grabbed onto that with both hands, and you would not believe the transformation that Amber has had. Her testimony is it's about as powerful. It's amazing what God has done in her life. And so she came back after a year with the most amazing spirit. She still deals with anxiety and panic attacks, derealization. She has, these mental things that are going on, but her walk with the Lord and I'm anxious for her to talk with you someday because her testimony is fantastic. Ryan, on the other hand, he went to Tucson. He stayed for a year. He came back, and while he was there, he wrote me the most amazing letters, which I found later. I didn't even remember getting those letters, and I'll share with you about that. But he came back saying that he had gotten saved and that he was turning his life around, and for a long time he did, and he was doing well. But the drugs are, at least I've been told by my daughter and my son, that they can be extremely powerful, and the call, the drive, the pull that they have on you is so strong. And so Amber was doing so well, but Ryan, on the other hand, was not. And so just last year, he told us that he was going to go to Fort Lauderdale, and he was going to be involved in another treatment program. So he was out there for several months, and he was doing so well. We were talking on, I don't know if you're familiar with Marco Polo, but yeah, I love it. And he loved it because he could just send me a video whenever it was convenient. And so I have all these videos of Ryan, and then he would Marco Polo with his grandma and his sisters, and I am so thankful for those videos. But I had invited him home, and this would have been his first visit home. He was going to come home for his birthday. He was born on Mother's Day, which was May 10th. And he was going to come home for Mother's Day. He was going to come home for his birthday, all that whole weekend. Well, he evidently, which I didn't know at the time, he had relapsed, and he missed his bus. And so when I called him, I could tell that he had relapsed. And so I said, Ryan, I said, if this is a relapse, I said, just get right back up there, just pull yourself right back up. And I said, come home anyway, even if you missed your bus. I said, take another bus and come home. And I don't know if it was him feeling like he had disappointed all of us. I don't know what it was, but he had decided to, well, chuck it, I might as well party more. Well, you can't party in today's world and get away with it half the time. These kids are being killed one after the other on fentanyl. And fentanyl is what he got. And I don't know if he meant to. I don't know if it was an accident. I don't know if I don't know. I really don't know. But I was upstairs painting, and my cell phone rang, and it was the Broward County Sheriff's Department. And they said, he just started asking me questions about my son, and he's going, when's the last time you saw him? When's the last time you talked to your son? I said, can I stop you for just a second? I said, Can you tell me if he's okay? And he just paused, and then he said, no, he's not okay. And I don't remember anything he said after that. I mean, my mind just went completely blank, and I said, I have to go, hung up the phone, and I just lost it. I mean, I went downstairs, and I told Mark, and I just remember running outside, and we live on a dirt road. We live off of 2 dirt roads, actually, out in the woods. And I went barefoot, and I walked back and forth on this dirt road, just screaming out to God, just screaming and screaming and screaming. I know the neighbors probably thought I'd lost my mind. So after a few days of doing that kind of thing, I couldn't bear the despair. I just couldn't bear it. And I thought, after a couple days, I remember Mark was outside. He works in the yard to have his therapy, and he was outside. So I went upstairs in the bedroom. I got down on my knees, and I remember putting my hands and my elbows on my futon that we have in the bedroom, and I just sobbed, and I just started, I was yelling at God, and I'm just crying out to him, and I'm like, God, you have to remove this despair. You have to take this away. You have to take it away. I cannot live this way, because I can honestly say, Charlie, at that moment, even as a Christian, I didn't want to be here. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to go on, And so I'm like, I knew in my heart that I had to ask for God to take over, because in my strength, I couldn't bear it. And I'm sobbing and I'm crying and I'm yelling at him and I'm yelling till my throat was sore. But when I got up from that futon, God removed that despair and he took it away. It doesn't mean I don't cry. It doesn't mean that I don't have my bad days, because I do. But he took that utter despair completely away. And I was able to move on that next Sunday even. I told Mark, I said, I have to go to church. And he's like, are you sure you want to go? And I said, babe, I don't think I can sing in the choir, but I can sit in the back row. And that way, if I have to get up, I can get up without disturbing everybody. And so we did. We came to church and we sat in the back row and I sobbed, and I was okay, and he was okay. I just have to say that this last year, and it's been a year. He was born on Mother's Day and he died on Mother's Day. But this last year, Charlie, has been the most transformative time in my whole Christian life. I can honestly say that I have felt God's presence and his power more than any other time in my life. Even with my parents, there's something about losing a child and losing my son, losing somebody who came from my body. I have just never felt God's presence more than I had this last year. And being a part of Northside has been so amazing. That the first Sunday when we went to Sunday school, I just remember it was the most.
With Miles and
yes, in Miles' classroom, and Jim Stoutmeyer, he came up and he put his hands on my shoulder, and everybody came around and they prayed over us, laid hands on us and prayed over us, and everybody's sobbing in the classroom. That's when I knew it's like, God, you put us here at Northside. You put us in this small group. You put us under this teacher. And it's just things like that, one after the other, of things that, people being in our lives that poured into us, poured their heart and their life into us. Being part of the choir. You had said that we were going to talk a little bit about maybe what my roles, the roles that we have here at Northside. We're active choir members. We joined almost the first Sunday we were here. Yeah. Being a part of that choir.
You sat right in front of us before.
Yeah. Just being in the choir has been such a ministry of knowing that they're family and that they're there for us. Had we not had that, I can't tell you where we would have been. One of the other things that I do, not that it's a big role or anything, but
it's still a role you play.
Yeah, I enjoy planning things. My job when I was at McKinsey & Company was planning things. I planned many people's lives all across the world. So being the activities director, I love doing that kind of thing. So I'm doing that for our small group. This last year I wanted to push myself because God has poured so much into me, and I just felt like I cannot be quiet anymore. I cannot be silent. I'm one that doesn't like controversy. I don't like conflict. I don't want to make any...
I don't either, but at the same time...
You have to be out there.
Yeah.
You have to speak, and I don't want to be quiet anymore. I want people to know my testimony. I want people to know where God has taken my life, from ashes, to this beautiful life that we have, even in sorrow. It's only been a year since Ryan, but I can say that, I am happy. I do wake up joyful. And that is only God. That is 100% God. So I wanted to push myself. So this last year, they talked about shop group. And I decided that I was going to sign up, even though I was scared to death to do it. I signed up to be the devotion leader. And it was a beautiful year. Absolutely loved being a part of shop group and being a devotion leader. And if they'll have me, I'm going to do it again next year. So I've enjoyed that very much. Did you want me to go into talking about the youth?
I got questions for that.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, so when it comes to our youth, so when you look at today's youth, and we can kind of for the last couple of minutes just some shorter answers for these, but when you look at our youth of today, do Do you see hope, or are you worried about our future?
I wrote that in my notes right here. You can see how amazed I am at the youth that we have at Northside, and that's where you know that the Holy Spirit is working in this place. Oh man, there's so many things. I mean, when we have our conferences, I cry every Sunday pretty much in the choir. But I mean, when I see God working in these youth that are going forward, that are signing up to go into missions, even you yourself, getting saved and hitting the ground running, doing all this that you're doing. You can just tell that God is at work here. My granddaughter, daughter and her family are moving to this area, and so I am so excited for
more
her.
members. Yeah.
Yes, but her to get plugged in to this youth group, and to move forward in her Christian walk, because we had the sixth graders. The D now sixth graders, we signed up to have them in our home. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was going to be. We signed up too, and I had the 11th grade boys. Whoa, yeah, I didn't realize it was going to be the entire sixth grade group, but
it was fun.
We had a blast, and they even begged me to do it again next year, so I must have done something right. I don't know, but knowing that Marley, my granddaughter, is going to be a part of that makes me so excited. So yes, I have huge.
And just to touch on it, like that, what was it, when we sang at the end, seeing that picture of everybody, like all of us on stage.
So
what?
beautiful.
And plus, y'all got a break. The choir got a break,
so beautiful. Absolutely.
But that was actually my favorite part, honestly, you was singing, because like, after looking at that picture, you're like, oh my gosh, look at that. Look at all those people.
It's amazing.
And there's 150 youth up there,
Yes.
And, but we'll be more than happy to, have your family, the rest of your family here.
Yes.
And I know that Noah's going to open, his arms wide open.
Yes.
So, and we can kind of touched on it a little bit, but, youth, we face probably even more stuff that you didn't even think about, maybe, in school or whatever, because of social media and everything. What are some, advice you could give to me and other youth that are struggling to navigate, this world in a biblical way? Like, because, there's so much that gets thrown at you, especially just to reference it, the month we're in.
Absolutely.
It gets thrown in your face,
Yes.
just in your face, and just gets shoved in there.
From my own experience, which was a different era, even back then, I remember going to a public school, and I had already gotten saved, but I remember being in my science class, and because I had already grounded myself in the youth group, I had already grounded myself in learning the Word, and learning about God, and learning what the Bible has to say about certain issues. When that science teacher would talk about the Big Bang Theory and all of that, I thought, you are full of baloney, And I just remember thinking that as a youth, because I had gotten so much teaching. Well, that's exactly what our youth need. Our youth need to be absolutely indoctrinated into what the Bible has to say, because they're going to be bombarded with everything the world has to say. And if they don't arm themselves with that, they're not going to have anything to withstand all of that when they go out in the world. And so even with my granddaughters, they're going to be moving into our home, actually. Yeah. That's what we're doing. And we're building a mother-in-law suite.
Cool.
And so we absolutely, the two granddaughters, we are always talking to them about, what the world has to say and what the world believes, and how the Bible talks absolutely, the direct opposite of that, and how we need to make sure that whatever we decide to do, her and the two girls, to base it on, okay, what does God have to say about that? And how should I think about it based on what God has to say? So that would be my advice, is to getting grounded in the youth group, getting grounded in, and if you have questions, go, have a mentor at the church. Have somebody that you go to, that you can talk to, that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah. And, you can have multiple, I've got people at the church, and also I've got, podcaster buddies too that I talk to on a daily basis. And they're not even anywhere around here, which is the crazy part. They're in completely different states. One's in Tennessee, one's in Ohio.
Yeah.
One's in, Indiana. They're all in different places, but I can message them at any time, and be like, they'll, pour into me or whatever,
Yes.
And ask, answer my questions.
That is so smart. And it's just, you being a younger age, I'm a senior citizen. I don't want to say that.
You don't act like it,
but but you being younger, how proud I am of you for doing that, because not they don't all do that, and we as adults, we need to be helping the youth learn to do that, to learn to reach out, for that kind of support.
Well, the thing about it for me is, I know I have issues, whatever you want to call it. So, reach out to somebody, regardless of who it is. So, last question, two, because I want to end it off on a positive note, is, what are some ways, this is specifically for you, is what are some ways you think our youth can stay away from, the drugs and the alcohol that, that your son, took that path? What are some ways that they can stay away from that?
It's the little choices early on. I look back at my son's life, and the little choices he would make even in music.
That affects a lot of things.
It really does. He loved rap music, and he would think that the rap music, the Christian rap, he thought it was too corny, and so
there's some good Christian rap.
There is
now,
but I mean, back then, when he was young, there wasn't as much of that going on. But you don't think that the little things are going to lead to worse things, but they do, because if Satan gets his
just a little bit in,
that's all it takes, and he can just absolutely run rampant, with a life. And I realize that people might think I don't, well, anyway, we won't go there, but I just know from my own children's lives that it's the little choices you make early on, and not having if you don't have that relationship with God, and every single day renew that relationship, renew that
put that armor on.
Yes. Then Satan has full reign. He's just like, hey, let me see what I can do with this person today and this person. And you have to fight. You have to fight hard.
And we talked about it, but, what is, like, if you had to name one thing, and one thing only, what's your favorite part about Northside?
I don't want to offend
For me, it's the people.
Oh, I love the people. I love the people.
Because, the people make, if the people make, how the surroundings going to be each morning or each evening, whatever.
Well, can I put it, even though it's more than one person?
Yeah, you can do that. Let's break the rules.
Just from my experience with our pastors, Pastor and Jeff being in our being in the choir, their heart is so evident, that the Holy Spirit in their lives. When Jeff's leading the choir, that he loves the Lord. And that is one of the things that I love the most, because that Robbie loves the Lord. I mean, it's just so evident, and you don't have to question it. They love the Lord. That they're pouring into you, and it's more about God than it is about the music even. It's more about that relationship. And anyway, that's probably the most important thing, and that I just love about this church.
And they pour into our youth so well, which, that's one thing that I've talked about, not to ridicule the little churches, but like all the times I've noticed some of the smaller churches, they either like have a very small youth group or don't even have one at all. And in my personal opinion, that's a mistake. Because like
they're our future.
They're the future, and then what are you doing to provide? You're not doing it.
That's right. Right. I had a couple more verses.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have more questions? Or?
No, I'm good.
I just wanted to end with these. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." And then Psalm 40:1-3, "I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and he heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. He has given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God." And that's my testimony.
And it was a great one to hear.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you so much for coming on and telling your
welcome.
testimony and wanting to come on, and tell it.
Very welcome.
And it's been an honor to talk with you, and I can't wait to see what the Lord does with this.
Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it.
Of course.
And with that, another episode of the Young Minds Podcast comes to a close. Always remember, you are never alone, and faith is action. So let's get out there.